Old quarter-dollar value. What if the 5-cent coin you've ignored for decades was never as ordinary as it looked? The 1994 5-cent coin entered circulation quietly. No headlines. No warnings. No one stopping to look twice. It was spent on coffee, dropped into spare change jars, forgotten in drawers and old wallets across America. But years later, something unexpected happened. Collectors began noticing subtle differences. Coins from the same year that didn't quite match. Details that looked slightly off. Characteristics that shouldn't have existed yet appeared again and again. At first, no one paid attention, because how could a modern 5-cent coin possibly matter? But history has a habit of surprising us today. The 1994 5-cent coin is quietly being re-examined, not because it looks rare, but because it acts rare. And that distinction has changed everything. On old quarter-dollar value. We're uncovering the hidden story behind the 1994 nickel, why collectors are suddenly taking a closer look. What subtle details may separate an ordinary coin from a serious discovery? And how someone watching this video right now could already own a piece of overlooked history. So don't skip. Don't assume it's worthless, because sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest secrets. Welcome to Old Quarter-Dollar Value, where ordinary change reveals extraordinary stories. When the 1994 5-cent coin was released, it was treated like any other modern nickel, produced in massive quantities, distributed nationwide, and spent without hesitation. No one saved it. No one protected it. No one imagined it would ever matter, and that is exactly why this story stayed hidden. Years later, collectors began comparing coins from the early 1990s and noticed something subtle. 1994 nickels didn't all look the same. At first, the differences were dismissed as wear or environmental damage. But as more examples surfaced, a troubling pattern appeared. These differences were consistent. Under magnification, certain 1994 5-cent coins showed unusual characteristics, slightly altered lettering depth, unexpected sharpness in specific design elements, and surface textures that didn't align with normal high-speed minting. From that period, this raised serious questions. How could coins from the same year, struck in the same era, behave so differently? One explanation points to production strain. The early 1990s were a time of heavy demand for circulating coinage. Mints were operating at extreme capacity. In such conditions, dies were faster, pressure fluctuates, and replacements happen quickly, sometimes too quickly to document properly. Coins struck during these brief moments of transition can carry subtle markers. Not errors obvious enough to catch attention at the time, but distinctive enough to stand out decades later. Another theory involves die longevity. A die used beyond its ideal lifespan can produce coins with inconsistent details. Some sharper, some softer, some showing metal flow patterns that should not repeat. When collectors began lining up multiple 1994 nickels side by side, these same patterns appeared again and again. That repetition matters because rarity in numismatics is not defined by how strange a coin looks. It's defined by how consistently unusual it is. What makes the 1994 5-cent coin especially fascinating is where these coins have been found, not in elite collections, not in sealed mint rolls, but in everyday places, coin jars, inherited collections, old folders untouched for decades. This suggests the rare variations were never removed from circulation. They lived normal lives, meaning some are still out there today, unnoticed. And this is where the story becomes personal, because if you've ever saved change, if you've ever inherited coins, if you've ever ignored a nickel because it wasn't old enough, you might already own one. That's why Old Quarter-Dollar Value focuses on stories like this. Not to promise fantasy, but to highlight how value quietly develops over time. How ordinary objects become extraordinary, not overnight, but slowly, patiently, invisibly. The 1994 5-cent coin is no longer. It's a spare change. It's a reminder that history doesn't always wear a label. An opportunity doesn't always shine. Sometimes it waits. right where no one thought to look. As the investigation into the 1994 US 5-cent coin moved deeper, the conversation among experts began to divide. This was no longer about whether small differences existed, that part was already clear. The real question became far more complex. Do these differences represent rarity or coincidence? Some numismatists argue that the unusual characteristics seen on certain 1994 nickels are the result of temporary production instability. During the early 1990s, U.S. mints were under constant pressure to meet circulation demand. Equipment was running at maximum speed. Dies were replaced quickly. Quality control focused on quantity, not long-term precision. According to this view, a very small number of coins were struck during brief moments when conditions were imperfect, pressure slightly off, dies partially worn, alignment subtly shifted. These coins entered circulation unnoticed, carrying markers that only became meaningful. Decades later, other experts take a more cautious stance. They warn that modern coins are often overanalyzed, especially when collectors search for rarity where none was officially recorded. Without mint documentation, they argue, claims of extreme rarity must be treated carefully. Not every variation becomes valuable. Not every anomaly creates historical importance. But then there is the counter-argument, the one that keeps this debate alive, across multiple, independently found examples. The same characteristics repeat. Not similar damage, not environmental wear, the same spacing, the same texture, the same depth patterns. Repetition suggests origin, not accident, and that repetition is difficult to ignore. A smaller group of specialists has proposed a third theory, one rarely discussed publicly. They believe that a short, undocumented transition phase may have occurred during 1994, when tooling adjustments or experimental settings were briefly tested before being corrected. Coins struck during such moments are rarely recorded, but history shows they do exist. If true, it would explain everything. Why the coins look ordinary at first glance, why they were never separated from circulation, why only a tiny number still survive with identifiable traits. This theory does not promise certainty, but it explains consistency, and consistency is the foundation of value. What makes the 1994 5-cent coin so fascinating is not just what we know, but what we don't know. There are gaps in the record, silence in the documentation, physical evidence without written explanation. In numismatics, those gaps matter, because many of today's most important coins were once dismissed. Their significance wasn't recognized until collectors compared enough examples, and time revealed the truth. That is why the debate continues. Skeptics demand proof. Supporters point to patterns. Researchers keep searching for one definitive example that could settle the discussion forever. Until then, the 1994 5-cent coin remains suspended between ordinary and extraordinary, and somewhere in a drawer. A jar or a forgotten collection, one of these coins may still exist, waiting to tip the scale of history, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. The way most important discoveries begin. And now, as this investigation slowly comes to an end, take a moment and really think about what this story means. A 5-cent coin. Something so small, so common, so easily ignored. For years, the 1994 5-cent coin lived an ordinary life. It passed through hands, pockets, registers, and jars without anyone asking a single question. No alarms, no headlines, no warnings. And yet, time changed everything, because history doesn't always reveal itself loudly. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it hides inside the most ordinary objects. What makes this story powerful is not certainty. It's possibility. The possibility that an overlooked coin carries meaning. The possibility that rarity doesn't always look rare. The possibility that someone watching this video right now already owns a piece of history. Without knowing it, that is why old $quarter value exists. This channel isn't about hype. It's about awareness. It's about teaching people to slow down, to look closer, and to question what the world tells them is ordinary. Before you move on, do one simple thing. Check your coins again. Look carefully at your 1994 5-cent pieces. Pay attention to the small details because, in numismatics, the smallest details often matter the most. If this video made you curious, if you've ever saved coins, or if you believe you've found something unusual, leave a comment below. Your curiosity could help uncover something the world has overlooked. And if you want to stay ahead of stories like this, if you want to learn about coins before everyone else notices, if you want to be part of a community that values knowledge over noise, subscribe to Old Quarter Dollar Value. Turn on all notifications so you never miss an investigation. Like this video if it changed the way you see coins. Share it with someone who keeps old change because one share could spark a discovery. Remember this? The most valuable things in the world don't always announce themselves. Sometimes, they sit quietly, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. This is Old Quarter Dollar Value. Stay observant. Stay curious. And never underestimate the story hiding inside a small coin. See you in the next episode, as we bring this story to a close. Remember this one simple truth. History doesn't always live in museums. Sometimes, it lives in your pocket. The 1994 5-cent coin reminds us that value isn't always obvious, and importance doesn't always shine.